Welcome into an all-new edition of Daily Faceoff Live, Wednesday, March 5th. It is 10:01 Mountain, 12:01 Eastern, which means we are 51 hours away from the NHL's trade deadline. I did the math myself. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Uremchuk and Frank Seravalli. Frank, 51 hours.
Less than 51 hours. We're now past noon, so... It's 50 hours and 48 minutes. Come on.
58 minutes.
58 minutes.
58 minutes. Yeah. See, I'm the math guy
See,
now.
they said there would be no math in this job.
Again, reminder, we are going to be live for 5 hours on deadline day, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern and going an hour past the deadline as well, because those deals are always trickling in. Carter Hutton is going to be a part of that show. He's also going to be a part of this show today. We'll chat with him in just over 10 minutes. But first, Frank, we got some trade news yesterday in the NHLs. The Edmonton Oilers made a splash, their first big move of the deadline season, as they acquire Trent Frederic from the Boston Bruins. The deal also involves the New Jersey Devils, who kept 50% of Frederic's already retained salary. The Bruins get Max Warner, a second and a fourth. But first, let's start with the Oilers adding Trent Frederic. This is a guy that I believe they've had interest in for quite some time here, and a guy who scratches a couple of itches for them, maybe some scoring and some size in the bottom six.
Yeah, look, I love the different element that Trent Frederic brings. And the best part about this deal from an Edmonton perspective is that they didn't give up anything in terms of flexibility to do it. Yes, there was a price paid, but go back to late February. I did a deadline playbook story on Trent Frederic, scouting report, potential return, potential fits. Listed at the time, second round pick makes sense. It's just that the other pieces that you see here, fourth round pick, Shane LaChance, those are pieces that you move to make the retention work. So what that means is they haven't boxed themselves off from doing anything else. They could still go out on the market and spend Evander Kane's money if they wanted to. They could not spend that money and still have a small amount of cap space left to essentially get either a player at league minimum and not need retention, or a player making in the neighborhood of $2 million or so, and have that chopped twice again like they did with Trent Frederic. Point being, they got a player and filled a need without having to eliminate their potential options for later in the week.
You have an article coming out on dailyfaceoff.com later today. What teams are still shopping for, and call it the final 48 hours leading up to the deadline. We'll talk about some of those teams in a bit, but just to stay focused on Edmonton, Frank, they got smoked last night by the Anaheim Ducks in their return to home ice. They've been one of the worst teams in the NHL since the beginning of February. Do you think this recent slide is going to push Stan Bowman to make another big splash? I know in your article you referenced they still need help on the blue line. I know a lot of fans are clamoring for a goalie too.
I don't see it. I still am in the camp that I don't think the Oilers, for all the reasons we've talked about over the last few weeks, are going to be a team that spends Evander Kane's money. And beyond that, I don't know that the market has really set itself up for a really good fit for Edmonton. So will they go out and get a defenseman? Yeah, I think they probably will. Will it be a big splash? I would caution against that. And they're also limited in terms of cap. By the way, do have a trade to report. This comes from Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press in South Florida, who says that the Florida Panthers have acquired Vanecek, goaltender from the San Jose Sharks, in exchange for winger Patrick Giles, who is mostly he's been a minor league guy for the most part, played 9 games so far this year for the Cats. So the Cats, interestingly, have tons of cap space with the LTIR room, yet a further signal that Matthew Tkachuk will not be playing again this regular season. So they're still waiting on an update from Tkachuk. We were thinking that they might want to get a backup in exchange to sit behind Sergei Bobrovsky. I think they tried with Chicago. That didn't work to get one of the goalies that they wanted. or had a surplus of. And so they grabbed Vitek Vanecek from San Jose, which, again, the goalie market really limited moving forward.
Very limited. And the Sharks, I mean, Vanecek had a $3.4 million cap hit. San Jose, no more retention slots. So a very limited market in who they could deal with. Florida with the LTIR space, as you said, is just a perfect fit.
Yeah, and they still have some more LTIR space. So don't be surprised to see the Florida Panthers, again, lowercase buyer, not many assets, not many trade chips. Spencer Knight was their best trade chip, but, they made a lot work with a little last year. Vladimir Tarasenko, Kyle Okposo, I don't think they gave up more than a second. So could they do that again this year and still add with the cap space they have? I think the answer to that is yes. Look for a scoring winger.
Yeah. Let's continue along, Frank. The flip side of that Trent Frederic deal, the Boston Bruins make their first sell-off move of this deadline period. Frederic gone. They get a decent collection of futures here in this deal. A lot of smoke about Justin Brazeau as well, being the other pending UFA the Bruins could look to move. Our own Anthony DeMarco, though, reporting maybe a guy like Brandon Carlo staying still and the Bruins won't move off from him. Is it safe to say this could actually end up being a pretty quiet deadline period for the Bees?
Yeah, I think Brazeau definitely still very much in the mix. I don't think they're going to be coming to terms with him on a new deal. He's got size. He's got interest. I think the Marchand injury complicates things a little bit. Like, he's not insanely far away, but if you're adding a guy that might only be there for a playoff run, deleting 2 or potentially 3 weeks off of that is less than ideal. So I still think they want to make an attempt to re-sign Brad Marchand, and you're going to see that here in these next couple days. And outside of that, unless someone really comes and knocks their socks off, I don't know that how much more there really is to sell. So Frederic just made sense on so many levels. Again, a guy that they weren't going to come to terms with. And the fact that he's injured and it's going to be a couple more weeks at least, he's not really helping their playoff push. So there's not even a sell to keep him. And you see another game like last night, and I don't know that there's that many believers in Boston.
No, they, again, only sit a couple points back of that final wildcard spot, but they've played 2 or 3 more games than pretty much every other team that's in the mix there. They get booed off the ice last night. They've lost 2 in a row. It's not going good for Boston. But again, I think if you're anyone, and I see an Avs fan in our chat, Marchand to the Avs, if you're another fan base hoping for Brad Marchand, I'd say stop hoping.
Yeah, I'd say we're dealing with low percentage chances.
Yeah. Let's continue. The theme of the day, struggling teams. The Oilers booed at Rogers Place last night. The Bruins booed off the ice at TD Garden, and the New Jersey Devils lose once again, 2 in a row, and they are trending to maybe being more on the bubble than we thought they were going to be, Frank. They're only at 72 points. That gap, again, they've played 63 games, which is 2 or 3 more than all those other teams in the mix. Things aren't going good in New Jersey. I like that we use this picture of Jack Hughes as well. No Jack Hughes for New Jersey for the next little bit. You have them as a part of your still shopping article, though. What do you think the Devils are going to be looking to do here? And does the Hughes injury crank up their aggressiveness maybe a little bit?
No, I don't think it does. I think if anything, what it does is just removes one more piece from them, at least in the moment, being a solid playoff team. I mean, Pat, I don't know if you have the standings and could throw them up there, but if you look at where the Devils are today, the Rangers, the Red Wings, the Blue Jackets, all those teams are now within striking distance. Look at Columbus, 4 points back, 2 games in hand. Rangers, 4 points back, 2 games in hand. It's not a pretty picture for the New Jersey Devils. And I would argue that for a team that really, of course, wants to get in and solidify that spot, great. But is this the year with Florida loading up, Tampa still yet to make their move, the Caps running away with the division? I'd say there's not a playoff series that I'm looking at right now that the Devils would be favored in. Does it make more sense to keep your powder dry and say, hey, you know what? For a lot of reasons, we haven't really played well since Christmas. Maybe we're a team that should sit back here. And unless we can get a guy that is a fit for now and the future, meaning the ideal fit that I put down on paper today as part of this Still Shopping article series was Casey Middlestat. If you could find a guy that is your age range or scheme of what you're building, plus has a couple years left at cost certainty, sure, go ahead and do that. But outside of that, I surely don't see the Devils as a team that should be spending big on rentals that might be walking.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I come out on it. And you can do a little bit of a glass half full, glass half empty thing when you look at the Eastern Conference standings. I think you can sit there and say, okay, Florida made a big move. Could they make another? Sure. Tampa Bay's looking good. And you mentioned Washington, and it's, Carolina's in their division. That might be a first round matchup and a big, big first round hurdle for the Devils. You can sit there and go, you know what? Maybe not our year. Let's not go crazy. You can also sit there and say, is there a true number one team? Is there a big Goliath sitting in this conference? So maybe that is
Yes.
justification to go
No,
out.
I'm gonna push back against that and say the New Jersey Devils aren't in the class of the Panthers, the Lightning, a couple of these the Caps. They're not there. The Canes. There's a top four, and then there's everyone else. And I think the Devils right now, with a sustained run of poor play, are in the second tier.
And that, I guess, is the other point too. It hasn't just been a bad week for them. They've been kind of on this steady decline now for, you could say, 6 or 7 weeks even. So the Devils
I'd
need
say
to
going
turn
back to Christmas. That's how ugly it's been for New Jersey.
Yeah, we'll see what Tom Fitzgerald gets up to here as we get closer to the deadline, Frank. But to wrap up our first 4 topics with your still shopping article, people can read the full thing up at dailyfaceoff.com because it is extensive. You went through pretty much half the teams in the NHL here, but there's a handful I really want to zero in on. And I guess because we just talked about them, let's stay in the East and talk a little bit about the Bolts and Panthers in Florida. Florida already made a big splash. Their next move, will it be a big splash or more lowercase, Frank?
More lowercase just because they don't have that many assets to spend, right? So like your first round picks are gone for a while. Spencer Knight was your best trade chip. You moved him. Now what? You're not really likely to want to pluck someone off of your roster. And I don't see what the need would be to do that. So you've got some cap space. You've got second round picks and beyond, some of them. And you've got a couple minor holes to fill. Like if the Panthers did nothing from here on in now after getting Vitek Vanecek, I think they'd be fine. Mackie Samoskevich has had a pretty good year. Evan Rodriguez, he's been okay. Luosterainen has been fine. Does that mean they couldn't use some scoring punch to take one of those guys and move them further down the lineup and bump an AJ Greer or Jonah Gadjovich out when you get to the playoffs? No, I think that's a totally fair assumption. And also given the fact that this team went out last year and added someone like a Tarasenko gives you an indication that that's also how they've thought about this roster in the past. So lowercase moves I'd expect from the Panthers, but they've got cap space. And I said this in the story. It's not like you get a refund for it at the end of the year. It's use or lose. So you don't spend it. You don't get to, you don't get anything back for it. So might as well, if you're going to have some, use it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kyle Palmieri as a fit. They have $5.3 million in cap space. He's a $5 million cap hit. You can kind of see how that would line up, and not a guy. They don't have a first-round pick in either of the next 2 drafts. They have 1 second in the next 2 drafts. You could maybe see how the value would line up there.
Yeah, and a second plus something else to get Kyle Palmieri for a playoff run. Like, I could see it.
Why not? The other team in Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they do have a few more assets available to them. They have 2 second-round picks this year, no third, but an extra 4th rounder as well. And then in 2026, they have all their draft picks available to them, rounds 1 through 7. They got 1 pick. So is it safe to say the Lightning, who are shopping for a similar thing, another scoring winger, Frank, could they be looking to maybe swing a little bit harder than Bill Zito and the Panthers?
I have the Tampa Bay Lightning listed as the most aggressive team in the NHL. That list that I sent you, the article is ranked in order from aggressive to not. So they're right at the top. I expect that they're going to make a big splash. Now, cap space is always an issue for them, but they have potentially some players on their roster that they could trade if they wanted to. They could find some roster flexibility. They could also have teams double retain. So here's the thing. The Tampa Bay Lightning for a while now have honed in on one thing and then they go and get it. They've had a really good track record for success. The only outlier is Tanner Jeannot. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round pick for Jeannot, who, by the way, is playing somewhere else now. So that didn't work. But you know what did work was Barclay Goodrow and Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel, guys that they've also brought in and kept. So Tampa Bay, they seize on something, they see an opportunity, and they go get it. Would an Alex Tuck make sense? Would a bigger swing from someone that you could keep for a little bit, be in line with what Tampa's up to. I think that makes sense. This team, the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, has played like a team that's earned it. They were one of the hottest teams in the league. Vasilevsky's back to being the big cat. And the Team Canada guys from Four Nations, including John Cooper, are riding high. So no reason to sit back. Are the Lightning any less of a bet to get through than the Florida Panthers? Like, I could see those teams going toe-to-toe. So why not? And you've got this roster with these stars. How many more unbelievable years are you going to get out of Nikita Kucherov and Victor Hedman? This is your window, so use it.
Yeah, like eventually, tough times will come. I don't know if it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years away. That's still a mystery. But in the meantime, you're right, Frank. You got these guys who are still producing. Why sit on your hands? Go take some serious swings here. So I love that. Let's wrap on one Western Conference team before we get to our big segment. The most aggressive West team you have listed is the LA Kings, Frank. Tell me the latest on the Kings and their deadline situation here as they appear destined to go up with the Edmonton Oilers again in round 1 of the playoffs.
Yeah, 4 straight years of the Edmonton Oilers in round 1, year 8 of the Rob Blake experience as general manager, and zero playoff round wins. They got work to do, and they're a difference maker away from being able to make noise. Not a prediction, just intel and reporting. If, underline this again, if Mikko Rantanen is available, be prepared for the LA Kings to step up and take a run at him. I think he's a perfect stylistic fit. I think he's a candidate to potentially re-sign there, as good as any other. And he's someone that I think the Kings would bend over backwards to try and acquire. So keep an eye on the Kings doing something a little bit bigger than you might have envisioned. I think they had talked to Nashville at varying points in time this year about some of the guys on their roster. I know that the Kings are hungry to make a splash, and they need to at this point. So don't expect them to sit back. If they do end up doing very little, it's not for lack of trying.
Yeah, I mean, if any market you'd think could convince Mikko Rantanen to forego true unrestricted free agency, it would be an 8-year deal from somewhere like Los Angeles. So it definitely lines up. Let's continue along, Frank, and get to our big segment for the day. It's our guy, Carter Hutton. He's brought to you by Tim Hortons Canada. Your favorite contest is back. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons, and that means you could win millions of amazing prizes with just the swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with Sell-Off Vacations, $1,000 Rakuten cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. Even the simple joy of winning a free coffee could make anyone's day. You only have until March 23rd, so download the Tim's app today. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Roll Up to Win, back at Tim's. Always a pleasure to welcome our goalie guy, Carter Hutton, back into the show. And Carter, you're going to be a part of our deadline show on Friday. So we're going to go to some other areas that aren't goalie focused here, but let's start with the blue paint. And hey, we have a Vanecek trade to talk about, which isn't a needle mover by any means, but does kind of say something about the state of the goalie market this year, no?
It does, right? And I think you look at the fact of the matter is a lot of these contending teams don't need guys, right? And the fact Spencer Knight gets moved out, and again, great for Spencer Knight. There's a little bit of a hole there, right? You look at the minors, where they're at with Florida, and Bobrovsky's a guy where he's going to play a lot of minutes. You need him, but the same thing, Florida feels that the East is wide open. I think we all do at this point. To have a safety net, like someone that can carry the mail, he's going to be protected. He's in a good situation. He's played just over 180 games in the NHL. He's more of a veteran now. He understands it. He knows his role. I think it's a good fit, and one with, obviously, with that cap space right now with the LTIR of the Chuck makes the most sense, I think, for Florida.
Let me just quickly jump in then, Carter. Do you think we'll see any sort of a big splash on the goalie market, whether it's the Binningtons or Gibsons or whoever?
I think it would have to be like a player in, player out, right? And I don't really think there's something that happens. I know, Frank, you're the expert on this area, but the only team for me that, maybe you see Edmonton, a team that's trying to win a cup, but at this point, I just don't really see anybody that really needs a guy is in dire need other than maybe a fill-in. And the way that I see it is a lot of those teams in the, the second wild card spot, I don't really think they see potential in them actually going the distance come playoff time.
Yeah, it's a tough market to really see an opening. I mean, even Edmonton, let's say you had the cap space, which they don't. Who are you going to get that you feel like is really moving the needle for you, that when you're Stan Bowman or you're Jeff Jackson, you put your head down on the pillow at night and you go, oh, finally, we got that solved. Like, as good as John Gibson can be, I don't know that he does it for me, and the term on the deal, which you then need to figure out after the fact.
Yeah, I think that would be the only one for me, Frank, is Edmonton. The fact of if they feel like if something happened to Skinner, are they okay going with Picard moving forward? Like, do they feel safe knowing that he can carry them out? Which I sure don't. But in the same sense, who is the guy to fill that role? If it's someone that's serviceable, Vanecek, I don't know what they would trade. They'd probably want an arm and a leg to get rid of him. But I think it's a tough situation right now. And for the first time, I'm on the trade deadline with you guys this Friday. It might be a little boring from the goalie standpoint.
Yeah, well, I think Utah is going to end up re-signing Vanecek. I think they're pretty close, and I think that Kevin Lankinen deal really helps set the table for what a deal for Vanecek looks like. So I don't know if it's going to be an exact replica of that, but I would imagine that it would be pretty close. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I think it's very comparable too, and a generous deal too. I retired too young. I wish I was about 10 years past here. I would have been making it hand over fist, but it's good to see, right? I think Lankinen is very deserving. And again, two situations where, Demko's out, Lankinen carries the mail. I think Vancouver's not even in this situation. It's not for Kevin Lankinen the way he played early in the season. And same thing with Utah. With Ingram being out, Vanecek's been great.
Yeah, and if maybe you got a little more coin, you wouldn't be hanging with us schlubs on a week-to-week basis.
I love this. Come on, this is it.
So as we talk general deadline away from just goalies, I have this story that just came out that ranks all the teams from top to bottom in terms of how I perceive their aggression to be. And I've got a team like the Washington Capitals pretty far down at the bottom. I don't know that they're going to be very aggressive. Is there a cup contender that you look at or two that you say, you know what? I really like this team. I'd like to see them not tinker with what they have.
Yeah, I think Washington is a good one for me too, especially coming into this season, we didn't really have them ranked very high, right? There was a team where we weren't really sure what they were going to do. You look at how good Logan Thompson has been, the Ovi story, and there's so many things going there. So I wouldn't really want to rock the boat because sometimes the best addition is the one you don't make, right? Keeping things status quo, keeping that chemistry going. And the other team for me that I think will be interesting is going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. I just think with their back end, Tanev being out and how well their goalies have played, and there's been a lot of health issues with this team, right? This is the first time in a lot of years, I think confidently we can say that this is the best goalie tandem they've had in years, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they platoon that headed forward. And if there is a piece, with Pacioretty being out and some guys kind of Calle Jarnkrok just getting back in the lineup, if status quo for this Leafs team might be the best thing for their future.
There's also a big mush of teams in the East right now. You can go Columbus, Rangers, Detroit, Ottawa, Montreal. They're all within spitting distance of each other. Hutz, is there one of those teams that you think maybe should be more inclined to push some chips into the middle here, maybe more so than the others?
I guess maybe just on principle alone for the Columbus Blue Jackets, like where they're at, just to send a message to their team that they're for real, right? I think looking at this season headed in, this was kind of a survival mode, right? But I think Dean Evason has done a very good job there. They have a lot of young, talented player. And maybe adding a little piece, I think, might shore this team up into the playoffs. And not necessarily the fact of thinking like, hey, we're getting in, we're going to make a bunch of noise. But I also think there's value in being in the playoffs, and there's value gained for younger players experiencing meaningful hockey, right? We look at this, my example I use a lot is the Buffalo Sabres, right? You rip it down to the studs and you want to rebuild and then never comes back around. And there's only so much time that you want your younger players playing meaningless hockey at that time of year. So I think for Columbus, there could be a lot of value down the road, making the playoffs and gaining experience in that sense.
Yeah, I was just reading this quote from Don Waddell, the Columbus GM, who was just saying 40 years in professional hockey, this is the proudest by far he's ever been of a team with all the situations, the tragedy, all the injuries that have happened to this team and how they've responded to it. So he was saying he was even waiting for the bubble to burst during this season. That carries definitely some weight when someone who's been in hockey for 4 decades says that.
Yeah, and there's value in that, right? That's a guy, he's been around the game, he understands it. And it's not necessarily, we always think about these teams that are going to be first round exits per se, right? You can always have a Cinderella run, right? But when we look at Columbus, I think they're going to be in tough in the East. But what I think in the future is getting meaningful games, drawing experience, helping these guys. And something I reflect on, I guess, in my career was sometimes being in meaningful games. And I remember my first year in Nashville, Rene being hurt and me getting to play 40 games. I reflected on those experiences later on in my career, getting a start against a top-notch team on a Saturday night where I had to learn to manage that. And then you earn that right to do that as you move forward. And again, even the Four Nations Cup this year, we look about Hellebuck playing a big game, Binnington. These are things guys can draw upon. I think that's so important for development.
Hutz, as always, man, thanks for popping on. Can't wait for Friday. 5 straight hours on the air. Giddy up.
Yeah, I was Frank going to be in the little box in the corner. He'll be calling in the big shot, so we'll be ready to go.
Put me in the corner.
All right, thanks, Hutz.
See you guys.
Let me do a little promo for our show on Friday. If you've never watched the deadline show that we put on, we have Frank on the side of the screen in his insider cam. You watch him the entire 5 hours, texting, calling, texting, tweeting, calling. And then as soon as Frank gets off the phone and he's got a deal, boom, you get that trade faster than you will get it anywhere else. I love the show we put together, Frank. It is really one of my favorite days of the year.
And here's my plug. It's as simple as this. If you're already watching, you know what the show's like, but there's only one insider you can watch on Friday. That's commercial free, no subscription required, no geolocation necessary. You can watch it on your phone. You can watch it on your TV. You can watch it on Twitter if you want. You can watch it anywhere. So everywhere else has gimmicks, filler, whatever else that you want to do. This is the only place where we just have nonstop breaking news, analysis, and the best crew going. So your choice.
Yeah, and Kenny on Twitter, first-time listener, staying because of your math skills. So there you go, Kenny. If you like our math, you're going to love the insider stuff we do on Friday as well.
With a profile pic like that, you're in, buddy. The bucket, come on. I used to wear the Jofa foam gun when I was a kid, believe it or not.
Frank, hashtag Ask DFO. Piece of news from today. The Columbus Blue Jackets making the extension with Matthew Olivier official. It is a 6-year deal at $3 million a year. And listen, when the cap's north of $100 million eventually, maybe paying a third, fourth liner $3 million won't be so bad. But I kind of wince looking at this one.
I agree. I mean, look, I think this is exactly the type of deal that you get yourself in trouble with. Look, no doubt that Matthew Olivier is an important part of their team. The energy, the toughness, all those things. But he's also absolutely shot the lights out this year in a way that he never has before. Don't expect that production moving forward.
Yeah, this is the first time in his career he's scored north of 5 goals in a season. So again,
yeah, he had 10 by like December. Like this guy, he was outrageous. And again, love the story. He's been a huge part of what they've done this year and all those things that we just talked about. But he's also 28. Like this is not a young guy. That deal takes him to 35 years old. His shooting percentage this year, do you want to guess?
I have it in front of me.
15%, and his career average is 10, but he also had 6.7 and 9.1. So look, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's a life-changing deal. Good for him, by the way.
Yeah.
$18 million is legit.
That's the Goudreau deal and Barclay Goudreau. And yeah, like we've seen teams try to, I call it's galaxy braining. It's like, okay, we love this guy. We should keep him around. Let's do 6 years at a super low AAV. Who cares? It's only $3 million. And you can go down the line. Miles Wood right now in Colorado, not aging well. Barclay Goudreau in New York, didn't age well, had to get out of it. Like, again, it just, these things, it's proven that these are not good ideas to do. But again, maybe with the cap north of or at 110, 115 by years 4, 5, and 6 of this deal.
He also got no trade protection, like a 10-team no trade. Like I'm going like, how? Like this guy was happy to have a job heading into this season. Yeah.
All right, let's get to our daily bets for Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Couple of plays for tonight. I like the over between Anaheim and Vancouver. Ducks on the second of back-to-backs. Vancouver been scoring or looking to get their scoring going a little bit. But again, the back-to-backs here in this line being 5.5. 4-2. That's all we need. Sign me up for the over between Anaheim and Vancouver and a little same game parlay that is all about Brady Tkachuk. He scored a goal in 3 straight, just taking him for a point tonight and 4 shots on goal. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 with the shots on goal side of it. Nice, easy, a little layup of a same gamer at just plus 125, but I like Brady to have a big night. Again, Chicago is Ottawa. Looks to keep pace in the Eastern Conference playoff race. And that'll bring us to garbage time, Frank. One of the stories that just popped up a couple of times this year was Gabriel Landeskog and his knee, and it's now kind of trending towards he might not be able to play again. And there's actually been a documentary crew following him around for the last couple of years, and the first teaser dropped today. I wanted to give everyone a chance to take a sneak peek at that.
Okay, so Gabe Landeskog, he's a first-rounder, youngest captain in the league at the time. He has an Olympic medal, but this surgery, will we ever see him play again?
I'm a 30-year-old pro athlete, but I can't chase my kids. Nobody has come back from this surgery in this sport and had a successful, productive career. My mind is unraveling.
Frank, you hear that line, I'm a 30-year-old pro athlete, I can't chase my kids around. You feel for him.
Yeah, totally. This has been an ordeal. This has been a long time. He hasn't played since hoisting the Stanley Cup. I mean, we're talking about calendar years now away from this team, and he skates and he looks good. And you're thinking, okay, what's the next step going to be? And then you hear Chris McFarland last week, their GM, say not rejoining the team anytime soon for a sustained period of time in practice. So they're going to spend his money. He said, you know, in parentheses, like, you guys can all figure out where this is heading. Does that mean he gets a shot in the playoffs this year? Is he going to try one last time? I mean, to me, the caveat in what he just said was really interesting. Had a prolonged, sustained career, successful career after. Maybe it's not that long. Maybe it's just a few weeks, but maybe he's able to go out on his own terms.
Yeah, and you'd certainly hope that for Landeskog, just from a personal perspective. All right, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Frank's still shopping article going up at dailyfaceoff.com. Tomorrow, the Morning Cup of Hockey boys are live at 9 a.m. Eastern. Frank and Jason will have an hour-long DFO rundown where I'd imagine you guys are just going to rip through a whole bunch of teams as you kind of do every year. Then we're live again tomorrow, noon Eastern, and live on Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So a lot of content. Make sure you are subscribed and make sure you got Frank's tweet notifications on, because you never know when the next big trade is going to drop. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody, and we will chat with you tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.